Hey everyone, Mad Hatted here. Today I'm doing a deck tech on a deck I've been playing in Standard for a while now, and I think it's been pretty good so far. We're about a month into Battle for Zendikar Standard. Format has evolved over the SCG, the Pro Tour, the various events we've had with Standard. But the deck I'm going to be showing you guys today is an Abzan Rally the Ancestors deck, which kind of tries to abuse. It's similar to the old Rally the Ancestors that was playable last Standard. However, we have lost Mogus Marauder, which is the main way of killing them, which was giving all your creatures haste and killing them because Rally can't let your creatures attack the way it's formatted. I'll talk about that later. But the new way that we kill them is with Zulaport Cutthroat, which whenever another creature you control dies, your opponent loses one life and you gain one life. Which is similar to Blood Artist. Of course, it doesn't trigger on your opponent's creatures like Blood Artist used to, but it's still a powerful effect, especially when you can rally all your creatures back into play and then sacrifice them again. And if you have multiple Cutthroats, that's usually lethal damage you'll deal. So, like I said, you want to get Cutthroats into play, and you want to have Nantuko Husk. Nantuko Husk sacrifices as many creatures as you want for free, and it gives it +2/+2. Usually don't attack with it though for lethal, so that doesn't matter as much. It's more about just getting the Cutthroat triggers. And the rest of the creatures are just fodder for the deck. So Blisterpod, when it dies, you get a 1/1 Scion. When Emissary dies, you get a Manifest. Catacomb Sifter is like it makes 2 bodies when it comes into play, and it also lets you scry whenever one of your creatures die, which is actually pretty important for finding the tools you want in your deck. Visionary just cycles. It's another creature. Horospex, it's good with Husk sacrificing, because whenever you sacrifice a creature, you draw a card. So it lets you find the pieces that you're missing. So if you need to find more Cutthroats, you need to find your Rally, whatever. So basically, all these creatures are kind of fodder, building into the engine of being able to have a bunch of creatures in play, put them all in the graveyard, then rally the ancestors of them all back into play, and then sacrifice them to your Husk, and Cutthroat triggers kill them usually. Collected Company is a sweet card to add in the deck because all of our creatures cost 3 or less. We have 26 creatures that are legal targets for Company, so I would say about 90–95% of the time you're going to hit 2 targets. Most of the time you have more options than just 2, which is really nice, but the main thing is making sure that when you collect a Company, you're going to have 2 targets most of the time, and that's usually the case with this deck. And it's a really good card at finding the pieces. So, like I said, this is a combo deck that needs to kind of assemble the pieces of Nantuko Husk is one card you usually need to win because you need to sacrifice to get the triggers. Like, it doesn't matter if you have a bunch of Cutthroats in play, can't get your creatures to die, then it doesn't do much. So usually Husk is important to find. Like I said, Cutthroats are important. Sometimes you want to find like a Horospex to start drawing cards, or a Sifter to scry at least. But yeah, that's the deck. We rounded off with some Bone Splinters, which is a removal spell that you have to sacrifice a creature, but it lets you destroy any creature. So it's an unconditional removal spell, which is pretty powerful. And the downside of it, I say like in quotes, downside, is you sacrifice a creature, but sometimes that's an upside, because if you have, say, like a Horsepex in play, but you don't have a Husk, you can't sacrifice to draw cards. But having Bone Splinters allow you to do that is pretty good. Or sometimes you want to make a Manifest and hope the Manifest is a creature. Then in that case, it's also an upside. I would say that Bone Splinters, it's a cheap, non-conditional removal, and the downside usually doesn't matter in this deck. If sometimes, like I said, it is an upside. If not, it's fine. Whatever. If you have to sack a Blisterpod, sack a Visionary, it's usually good for killing whatever you need to kill. So that's the creature base, or creature and spell base. The lands are pretty standard for the way Battle for Zendikar works. I know some of you will be asking, well, you said this is an Abzan deck, so why do you play all these blue fetch lands, and why do you play these blue duels, like Sunken Hollow and the Prairie Stream? We don't have any blue cards in the main or any blue cards in the sideboard. Well, the way the fetch lands work is if you want to have like multiple fetch lands, so say we want to play a 12 fetch land deck, we're going to have some off-color fetch lands. Say we have a Flooded Strand. Flooded Strand can find Canopy Vista, which is good, but it can't find black unless we play Sunken Hollow, because we can use the blue off of this to find blue-black. Polluted Delta can find us a swamp, but if we want to find white off Polluted Delta, then we need to play Prairie Stream. So that's why we play this like 4th color, because it's kind of free, and it lets us actually make our 3-color deck more consistent at finding all 3 colors, which is kind of weird. But that's just the way Battle for Zendikar works with the 5 fetches and the 5 Battle for Zendikar duels. It's kind of interesting. But I'm sure people have heard a lot about that already if you've been keeping up with Standard. Um, Now, talking about the deck, like I said, it's a combo deck that basically you just want to put creatures into play, cycle through your deck, see enough cards, put them in the graveyard eventually, and then rally back for the win. Like I said, Rally the Ancestors doesn't let you attack with the creatures you bring back because it is an instant, so you can do it on your turn or their turn, but it exiles your creatures at the beginning of your upkeep. So if you cast it on your turn, you can have them through their turn, but at the beginning of your upkeep, they get exiled. Even if you cast it on their turn, that still happens, so you don't get to attack with them. So like I said, what you're killing them with is cutthroat triggers. So usually the way games play out is first few turns you develop blister pods, emissaries, visionaries, sifters. You're hoping to find like husk, like I said, to sacrifice all your stuff. Hopefully you can get some good value out of like scrying to make sure you hit the rest of your pieces, or horsepex to draw you a ton of cards off of sacking blister pods and these smaller things. And then eventually you'll have a bunch of creatures in your graveyard and you'll rally them back. And the first rally might not be for lethal, you might not have a cutthroat, you might not have two cutthroats, but bringing all your creatures back gets you incidental value off of like drawing cards off Visionary, off of making Scions with Sifter, Blister Pods, Sultai Emissary making a Manifest, which might be another useful creature. Stuff like that. Or, if you bring back a Horspex and a Husk, you can sack all your stuff again, draw a bunch of cards, make sure that the second time you rally, you'll be able to kill them with Cutthroats. So that's usually how games play out. It's kind of linear deck because if your opponents don't interact with the combo in a way, like they're not exiling your creatures or they're not leaving up counter spells to counter rally, they can't really interact too well with it. If they're just a creature deck that's beating down, you'll trade off your creatures, chump block, whatever, and eventually you'll find rally and kill them. So that's why I think this deck is rather powerful in this format. Looking at the metagame, the top decks are, I would say, a Tarka Red, Abzan decks. Like these green-white Megamorph was a good deck. There's more of a Bant deck now. There's like a Bant tokens deck. I guess there's kind of a Bant Megamorph deck. I would say that the best matchups are the Bant decks and the green-white decks because they don't interact with you in a good sense. Like the Bant deck might have some counter spells, but that's about it. Megamorph doesn't interact at all with you. Like their removal doesn't exile. They're just kind of playing creatures and beating you down. But like I said, that's not very good strategy against this. It's what we're really good at dealing with. The Abzan decks, I would say, are a good matchup. However, there is one problem card, which is Anafenza. We played it on our sideboard too, but Anafenza, whenever a creature we put into a graveyard, or opponent's graveyard, exile instead, that actually shuts off our entire deck. Because all of our effects are when a creature dies. Like when Blisterpod dies, put a token into play. When Emissary dies, manifest. When a creature dies, draw a card. When a creature dies, drain them. And if they have an Anafenza in play, none of your stuff works. So out of Abzan, if they play a bunch of Anafenzas, that's annoying. That's why we have two removal spells main, and that's why we have a bunch of removal spells like Murderous Cut and Righteous Surge in the sideboard that can kill Anafenza, because we do need to kill it. But other than that, I would say Abzan's a good matchup, because the rest of their deck is fairly similar to, green-white dirtly beatdown decks. Now, decks more like Jeskai Black are a bit harder because they have stuff like main deck Dispels and like more counters in the sideboard, and that's usually the most annoying thing to deal with, is counter spells for your rally. We do have Duresses for that, but I would say those are one of the more annoying things that can happen. Like, I would say the biggest weakness of this deck is that there are decks in the format playing main deck Dispel, like Jeskai Black, like Bant Tokens. But I would say, other than that, the deck's fairly well positioned in the metagame. Like I think the matchup against Tarka Red's fairly strong if you don't lose to Become Immense Battle Rage combo, which is why you have a bunch of removal spells post board for that. I would say, like I said, the Bant deck. Bant Tokens is a pretty good matchup because they're kind of dirtily, and they don't have too many counters, so you can usually deal with that. Um, Megamorph's a good matchup. Jeskai Black, I would say, is the rougher matchup, but we have a good sideboard plan for that because, like I said, they have a lot of counters, and we try and side out of that. We do this transformational sideboard into this kind of grindy deck with Abzan Ascendancy's Evolutionary Leap, because the control decks in the format, like Jeskai Black or Esper Control, they can't deal with enchantments too well. So bringing in like Ascendancies and Evolutionary Leap and Duresses and playing more of a grindy game is a pretty good strategy against them. What else do I want to mention for this deck? Oh, I guess I wanted to mention how there's a lot of different decks in the format with Cutthroat, with Husks. So there's like a black-green Aristocrats deck, there's a blue-black Aristocrats deck, there's Mardu Aristocrats, 4-color Aristocrats, there's 4-color Rally deck too. There's some Rally decks that play like blue for Jason, DC's Faithful. I personally just like to stay consistent 3-color if we're playing a Rally deck. I would also like to say that Rally is a different deck than the Aristocrats deck. So people are going to say, what do you think about blue-black Aristocrats or compared to Rally? And they're different archetypes. Like the Aristocrat decks are a fair deck. You're trying to kill them with attacking with Nantuko Husk. Like I said, this deck doesn't usually attack for lethal with Husk. It rallies back and kills them with Cutthroat triggers. I think Rally is a more powerful card to have because it lets you be explosive when you kill them, and it lets you return all your creatures and kill them and generate a lot of value off of that. Well, like a green-black deck is kind of just, they're nickel and diming them with the Cutthroat. They're not trying to have this explosive turn where you kill 10 creatures and drain them for 20. Like, you'll get some value off of Cutthroat, but it's not trying to be like a kill them on one turn combo deck like we are. But I think the Rally part makes us better against decks that don't have counters for Rally. Like, if no one played any counterspells, the Rally deck would obviously be a better version. But the decks that do have counters are a bit better against the Rally version than, say, the Aristocrats version. So that's kind of the trade-off there from playing Rally, which is a more powerful card, but potentially weaker to cards like Dispel, versus playing blue-black or green-black, which is a bit weaker, I would say, but it doesn't have as much of a time with cards like that. So I think that's the deck. That's basically what I wanted to talk about with it. I might do some video coverage, like playing a daily or something with it in the future. I've been streaming a lot with it, and I've been having fairly good results on Magic Online. So I would definitely recommend this if you want to play, like a sweet deck that's also really powerful. I think this deck it's definitely up there. I don't know if I would say it's tier 1, but it's definitely a powerful deck that can contend with the tier 1 decks. And I think it's also a fairly cheap deck too, if that's something people are concerned about. Other than like the mana base, the only really expensive cards are like Collected Companies. I don't know, maybe like kind of Fens on the sideboard, but yeah, in general, it's a relatively cheap deck too, if you're building on a budget. So I think that's everything for today. I've probably gone on a bit too long with this, but I hope you guys enjoyed the deck tech. Feel free to leave comments below if you have any questions about the deck. You can message me also. You can message me on Twitch or tune into the stream and ask about the deck if I'm playing with it, stuff like that. But I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys around.